Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Formula, where we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. My name is Trevor Carlson, and I will be your host for this evening. This week, I got the opportunity to interview my friend and one of the founders of Art of Ed, Derek Balsley. Derek and I discuss how he and his wife started Art of Ed, an online education company for art teachers continuing education. The best part about their story is they built this business in a town of 3,600 people in Osage, Iowa. Derek is an exceptionally talented guy when it comes to growing a business, and I really appreciated him taking the time to chat with us. So let's pass the ball over to Art of Ed's Derek Balsley. So Derek, I want to say thank you for showing up on the Formula today. What would you say is the best tip that you have for someone starting a new business today?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, so thank you. Best tip. Wow, jumping right in. I like it. I like it. So, I think the fact that somebody is to the point where they're ready to start a business is pretty exciting in and of itself. I think a lot of times right now, at least where we're at in our culture, is that a lot of people look down on entrepreneurs, or people think that it's not a healthy thing to do, or it's people who are starting a business are taking advantage of somebody, and that's how they create their. And so the fact that they've overcome some of that propaganda that's out there is worth a hand to them on the back already. So, I think entrepreneurship, obviously I see it very much differently, that entrepreneurship's a super powerful way to improve the world and make a difference in people's lives and make a dent in the universe. And so business is a super powerful way to do that, and I think it's pretty exciting. Anybody gets to that stage where they're saying, I want to get to this point, I want to be able to do something like that is really great. So, as far as advice to anybody who's starting out, I think right now the gatekeepers that are in this industry like to convince people that the only way to start a business is to go out and raise $1 million of capital and start burning cash. And that, if you're doing that, that's a startup, and if you're not, it's not. And I think that's really it's really unfortunate, because a lot of people think that because they can't do it that way, that they can't do it at all. When in reality, starting a business simply means creating a product or service that improves somebody's life and executing on it, delivering it, selling it, and delivering it. So if I was to give anybody one piece of advice, if you had to boil it down, I would say that the number one thing is create something and find a way to sell it. Find a customer find a problem and solve it. Find a person that has an issue, a problem that they deal with on a daily basis. Create something real, something small that you can create right away, and see if somebody's willing to pay for it.
Would you start with the product then, or the customer?
You always start with the customer. Products and services are a result of the customer and a result of the problem that the customer faces. And so oftentimes I see problems with people who start businesses. They say, well, I have this idea for a product, and they just build it, and then they find out a year and a half later, once they're down the road, that that there aren't any customers for it, or maybe there are customers for it, but they're not willing to pay. Right? There's a difference between having a product that somebody wants and having a product that somebody wants enough to part with their hard-earned cash. And so starting with the customer, starting with a problem, and solving that is a much better way to get started. If
you were starting something new today, where would you start looking for those customers at?
Interesting. No, this is good. This is great. So I think people who want to be entrepreneurs are really deathly afraid of spending any time inside of a more traditional business. And I actually think that working inside of an institution that's been around for a while and has lots of problems is a great way to come up with ideas for new companies. I mean, there's no company that exists that has 50 employees or 100 employees that doesn't have massive problems one way or another, or massive opportunities. And so working in one of those organizations and getting an intimate look as to what those problems are is a great way to come up with ideas for new businesses. In fact, that's how we started our business. And so my wife is an art teacher, And the whole reason that we started our business was that she was terribly frustrated at the lack of high quality, relevant professional development for our teachers. So in the schools, in K-12 schools, the professional development that's delivered to teachers is very much generalized. It's very much one size fits all. And for, an art teacher or a music teacher or a PE teacher, they're teaching very specific topics. It's a very frustrating experience to go through. And or to find a graduate class, master's degrees that are targeted towards this very specific topic. And so that source of frustration led to her bringing that frustration to me and us coming together and collaborating and creating the business. And so these real world struggles are oftentimes the best sort of spark that's needed to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, so you guys have been running Art of Ed, what now, for...
Over 6 years, almost 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it'd been
that
that long.
It goes fast. It goes fast.
Yeah, so it sounds like that you got started from, your wife noticed some issues in her continuing education. If I'm using the wrong words, just correct me.
No, it's all right. I've been learning them too.
Right. So from her struggles with continuing education, you guys kind of came up with an idea to solve this problem, and you got started by blogging?
Yeah, so she had a blog at the time, and it's funny, she was actually going to name it, jessicabalsley.com, and I said, well, no, who knows how big this is going to be, what this is going to look like, so let's name it something different. We came up with the name The Art of Education, and, years later, that's proved to be a very wise choice. But so yeah, today we have, 42 or 44 team members now. That's really sad that I don't know the actual number. And... but where it all started was a blog, and she was writing weekly articles on that blog for our teachers. And due to this frustration with the professional development, and then later when she went to get her master's degree with the same struggle, we sort of said, well, let's try and solve this problem. And so we took the blog that she had, which already had a small but strong number of followers, and we decided to turn that into the first online magazine for our teachers. And so calling it a magazine was strategic, and then we just wanted to say, we want to have multiple writers. This isn't about one person's opinion. This is about a broad number of opinions. So we got lots of different writers. We brought them in. We're producing an article every single day. And then we partnered with a college. Jessica, after she got her master's degree, was teaching classes at a local college, and we had the idea of saying, well, if you can teach the courses at that college, what if we did the sales? What if we did the marketing? What if we did the course development and the delivery and the entire thing? What if we ran the courses on our platform? And so we started to look for partners that were out there, and we found somebody who would partner with us. And they said, yes, absolutely. You have this audience. We don't have the opportunity to reach those students, and you can. So we created, quality courses. They approved the courses. They approved Jessica as the instructor, and we launched them. And I could still remember the day. We had a little app on our phone. I think it might have been the Shopify app or something similar, but even every time a sale would come in, you'd get a ding. And I remember, the day that we launched it, we'd spent the, 3 days before that. What most people don't realize is that to get to the point where you're ready to sell something takes a tremendous amount of time and energy. And so we were devoting weekends to it, nights, and, working a full-time job and then doing this later on.
How long did that take you guys?
Boy, it would have been... all the time that was spent on the website and things like that, but it would have been a year, I'm sure. And then once we decided to do courses, to develop the courses took months, to build the landing page and all the pieces of the puzzle. The course platform took, months, I'm sure, as well. And then to launch it was just, super exciting. And I think within an hour or two, we had our first course, the ding on the phone, and it was, a $300 class payment came in. And back then, I remember buying a grill for $300, and we were like, we could buy this grill. We might have to cook ramen noodles on it, but we could get this grill, And so that was a big deal, and so that was kind of an exciting opportunity. But then, after that, we added more and more classes. We ended up partnering with a different institution that gave us a higher degree level of accreditation. So right now we have thousands, 3,000 graduate students a year that take our online classes. They take those, they use them for relicensure. They use them for applying as electives towards a master's degree or just salary advancement, things like that. So they've been very popular, and we have a lot of really devoted fans, people who are really passionate about what we do.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I want to ask you about as you were talking through that there. One is, as you were going through the process of getting this off the ground and establishing these partnerships, did you guys face any type of rejection or struggles or anything like that?
I think the biggest struggle was probably our own doubt, right? And so, and this is something that I think maybe I'm a little bit better at than my wife, one of the few things. But, I think her perspective was, you can't do that. That's not how it's done. A college delivers courses. And my more business mentality was coming at it from the perspective of there's a need. There's customers, they're in pain, they have a need. There has to be a solution, and so let's figure it out. Let's build it. Let's do it. Let's ask questions. Let's talk to the right people. Let's not say we can't do it until we've proven that out. And so getting over our own mentality at that point. And she also struggled with just the idea of charging money for things. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are in the same boat. They perceive the act of asking for money as taking advantage, or of I could never do that. I'm just going to give them free content and that's it. But what they don't realize is that by producing things of more value and charging for them, it allows you to impact more people over a longer period of time in a more meaningful way. And so because we decided to offer a product that cost money, offer these courses, we're able to develop new courses. We're able to now have an online conference, and now have an online subscription professional development service for schools. And we're able to host 2 different podcasts, and we're able to produce an article a day, and we're able to do all these different things that give the full spectrum of learning for our teachers, all because we got over that hump of saying it's okay to charge. So it's really sad when you see people that can't get over that hump and and don't see that they're adding value to society.
What advice do you have for those people that are struggling with getting over those mental hurdles or charging for their content?
Well, I think to me it's doing your own research and understanding that the economy is the way that everything runs. I mean, the economy is the reason that you can walk down the street and get a BLT for $5, right? The economy is the reason that we don't have to toil all day to put food on the table at night. And so the process of creating products and services, the process of buying products and services, is what makes everybody wealthier and better overall. And so the great thing about these types of transactions is they're completely choice driven. And so you don't have to feel bad about selling something because it's always their choice. And if they choose that buying your product and service is going to improve their life genuinely, then you need to do that, and you need to take that money and invest it back into developing even bigger and better things that you never could have dreamed of creating. We just released ArtEd Pro, which is an online subscription-based service for our teachers. And it's professional development, but more of sort of a automated, self-paced, sort of like Netflix for professional learning for our teachers. And we, to create that, we spent lots of money. Lots of money to get it to the point where it was good enough content, high caliber enough to put it out to the audience. And we never, ever could have got to that stage if we would have said, well, we're just going to give articles for free online.
What kind of validation did you run on that subscription service? Because I know you said you did earlier. Did you do the same thing with this time around?
We had, I think a lot of because of the size that we are, it's still very much gut oriented. We have a few key people that are coming up with ideas and saying this is going to be awesome, and you sort of know when you hit that level where it's like, this isn't just something that's cool. Like, people are going to go crazy for this. If people aren't going to go crazy for it, then don't bother. And so, especially when you're in as small of a niche as art education. And so we run it off of that gut test. And then we also do, during the development phase, when we have initial sketches, we would show it to a spectrum of people in our audience to say, if something like this existed, would you buy it? Yes. How much? This. And so there was a few strategic ways of sort of gauging the audience.
Do you have like a standard step-by-step process that you use when you're going to go test something? I'm asking because I'm hoping a listener can listen to this and be like, okay, with the idea that I'm thinking of now, I can apply it to this process, or apply this process to the idea and then go test it.
Yeah, I don't have a very specific process, but one thing I would say is pre-sell things, or not even pre-sell, but go to somebody and say, would you buy this? And don't ask them, do you like this? Do you think this is cool? Because the answer is always going to be yes. But say, put it in front of them and say, if I gave you this, what would you pay for it? Don't tell them what you're going to charge. Say, what would you pay for this? And the other thing is, we've had bits and pieces of it scattered around. And so we knew people loved these videos. We knew people loved these resources. And so this is a way of we just took it up a notch, really. And so I think that's a helpful thing as well. But I think a lot of people are too afraid to, or they're too worried about getting things perfect, and they're waiting for it to be perfect and built and spend tens of thousands of dollars creating X before they'll show it to anybody. And that's insanity. You have to get it out there. And in fact, when you have an idea, I remember when we were starting out, I didn't want to tell anybody about, the new idea, the new company.
You have to sign an NDA first.
Right, exactly. Sign an NDA. And the truth of the matter is, you want to tell everybody. You want to get it out there because nobody's gonna steal your idea because it's just an idea. The execution is where it gets special, right? And nobody's going to devote their life to building your idea.
What's your definition of execution? Because I hear that all the time, and I'm always curious as to if everybody's talking about the same thing or if it means different things to different people.
That's interesting. Building something, creating something, spending hours, and then at the end of those hours have something to look at and show someone. Because you can pre-sell things without having built anything, right? Or not pre-sell, but go out there and prove out a concept. And so I think it's the hustle, right? It's actually going out there and building. What it's not is running a survey and doing some. I talked to a few people and I wrote a business plan. That's not business plans are not executing. Building a landing page is executing.
It's like actually making like a prototype of the widget that somebody then can commit to pay for or can test out and play with. Something like that?
Yes, exactly. And I think even that sometimes cannot feel like execution if it takes too long, right? And so I think, especially people in the early stages of their businesses, they'll spend 2 years figuring out the next version of the product. And, I'm going to do a plastic version, and then I'm going to do this type of plastic version, and when in reality they need to get something created, get it out there, get it in the hands of potential customers and start selling it, because the real best way to know how to improve your product is to let your customers tell you how to improve it. Customers can't tell you what products should exist, but once they see that it exists, they can tell you whether they love it or hate it, and they can tell you what's wrong with it.
Yeah, that's something we're thinking about, because it's when I think about and I'm sure you know a lot of these people where they're like, we've been working on this idea for 3 years. We're just about to take it to market. And I'm just like, man, you guys, I feel like you could have done that month 2 or month 3.
Absolutely. And in fact, the first thing I hear when I hear that, or the first thing I think of when I hear that is, I'm out. I'm not like, if you couldn't execute it on something, if you can't point to real traction with real people within that time frame, then you probably never will. That's the scary part.
Yeah, it's almost like the idea of having your product out in the market is better than actually getting it there.
Well, once it's in the market, it becomes real, right? All of a sudden, all these potentials and all these things that it could be dissipate, and now there's just the reality of what it is that you're selling. And so, there are some strategic reasons to avoid that from companies that are trying to raise big money, but for the bulk of companies that won't raise big money or strategically shouldn't raise big money, that's a mistake, because it lengthens the amount of time between your idea and whether that idea is worth a damn.
Mm-hmm. And if you value your time, you probably want to cut that time down to as short as possible, I would assume.
Yeah. Time's the most important most important asset we all have. So, and it's fleeting fast.
You can't replace it.
Yep.
Just a random question that I have, because you're one of the only people I think that I've interviewed that is business partners with their wife.
Yeah.
I guess Drew and Heather work together at FARC.
Okay, yeah.
But do you have any thoughts on, or anything you'd like to share about the experience and what it's been like?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think there aren't many situations where I think people should start a company without a co-founder. Like, to start a company, I used to be deathly afraid of the fact that I wasn't amazing at anything. I resented the fact that I didn't. There wasn't like one thing that I was just crushing it at. But the truth is that being sort of a generalist, being a jack of all trades, or maybe like a 10 of hearts at all trades, I don't know what I am, but is actually very, very beneficial, because when you're starting up, you have to do everything. You're going to do the accounting, you're going to do the marketing, you're going to do the sales, you're going to do the product development, you're going to do the operations and all of it. And so having a breadth of skills is a very useful thing. And even if you do have a full breadth of skills, you still need somebody else who has a different breadth of skills. And so I was lucky that I happened to be married to that person. But Jessica and I think we work extremely well together, and people are always asking, I cannot believe you can work with your spouse all day long. And in fact, we love it. I mean, I just couldn't imagine a better situation. But I think what makes it work for us, and maybe this is good advice in trying to find a spouse, let alone finding a business partner, but I think both, is that you want to work with somebody who has identical values. So you pretty much agree on everything as far as where it should end up being, and what the end goal is, and who you are as a person, and what the company is as an entity. But you should totally take a different path than that person. So Jessica and I totally agree on how we want to raise our kids and where we want to live and what we want the company to look like. We disagree on almost nothing. But my approach and her approach to getting there are very opposite, which means that I can work over here while she works over there, and we meet in the middle and we create something awesome. So that seems to work really well for us.
I'm reminded a little bit of a quote that I when Drew was running for governor, they asked him about it, because his wife was running as lieutenant governor with him, and he said something along the lines of, if you can't stand to like work with the person that you're married to, or trust them enough to work with them on something, or be a business partner with them, then maybe you married the wrong person.
Well, and I don't think I'd take it that far personally, because I think everybody has a different magical way of of running their thing, right? And there's 1,000 different ways of doing different things, and so I know a lot of people who have very successful relationships that could not work together. Probably my parents is actually a good example, right? So I think it's different strokes for different folks, but for us it works really, really well, and I'm very, very thankful for that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, because if you can spend time with somebody you care about and work with them, then I think it's a win-win, especially given the limited amount of time that we have.
Right, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about the online education market and where that's going. Because, there's a couple ways that we could go with this. Because one is, I know you've given me some advice about niching down, and you guys have done a really, really good job on that. And the other is, the future of online ed, how it's growing, and where you see it, you see it going.
Oh, this is a very interesting discussion, and there's a lot of people thinking about this, and I personally think a lot of them have it dead wrong. And so, if you think about the traditional higher learning system, it was created in a certain way due to limitations that existed. Geography is a prime example. So all institutions prior to 20 years ago existed in a very specific location, and their job was to serve students within 100 miles of that campus, right? And in that 100-mile radius, you had a certain percentage of doctors and a certain percentage of lawyers and a certain percentage of teachers and whatever else it is. And so those institutions could serve those individuals fairly well. But there's a lot of people that were completely left out of that system. So in our case, art teachers, obviously there are very few art teachers relative to the general population. This might be chiropractors, this might be nurses. It's hard to say, or specific types of nurses. And so the traditional model leaves a lot of people out. And it also creates 1,000 different institutions each of them covering 100 different topics and trying to be experts at everything. And so if you think about even, I guess you can maybe think about an Ivy League school, or think about a big state school in whatever your state is. If they're doing a business program, they have 1/100th of 1/100th of all the business students in the country. So how can they possibly bring in the best teachers on business? They can't, right? It's impossible. So all the best teachers are spread out amongst all these different institutions, and nobody has all of them. When you tip the system on its head and you say, and the internet makes this all possible, right? And you say, okay, now this thing called the internet exists, and how do we want to use this tool to change higher education? I think the gut reaction of most people is, well, we're just going to replicate the existing model in this new system. University of Phoenix, things like that. They just say, well, we know how to run classes, we know how to hire instructors, we're just going to do that online. You also have a different approach now, which is the MOOCs, which is to say, they're still taking videos and stuff from these individual institutions and they're putting up online. The MOOCs have all sorts of problems. They say, well, because it's online, it doesn't really matter how many students there are. There can be thousands of students. But MOOCs, the more you research them, have massive, massive problems, especially when you start looking at course completion rates and things like that. The number of people who start it versus the number of people who actually learn something and complete it is like less than 5%. And so there's huge, and then also as far as the interaction between the students, just watching videos is not what I would consider to be really high quality education. It's watching videos, it's reading, it's discussing with students, it's discussing with your instructor. It's the collaboration and interaction between the students that adds a tremendous amount of value. And so the approach that we're taking, there's all these different ways of looking at it, but the approach that we're taking is to say, the university that we build, the institution that we build, we want it to not have, we want it to be, first and foremost, we want it to be extremely narrow in the topics that we cover. So because we are a worldwide company, because we have a worldwide audience, we can say we're going to focus on this extremely narrow niche, in our case, our teachers, but that could be anything. This extremely narrow niche, and because of that, we're going to be able to offer super relevant, high quality, broad spectrum of courses for this very narrow group of people, deeper than any other institution possibly could because they don't have enough of a potential customer base to do it. And so the quality of the courses is higher, the depth and breadth of the courses is higher, and the quality of the instructors is higher because now we have so many students and so many classes that the world's best instructors in art education want to work with us. And so you have this sort of economy of scale that exists. And so the future that I see is that in 50 years there will be far fewer colleges. A much higher percentage of them will be online, and a much higher percentage of them will focus on very narrow niches.
Do you see a lot of those online schools being partnered, or I'm trying to think of the right terminology here, but let's say there's a physical college and maybe that college niches down and then they have an online presence as well. Do you see that kind of happening?
I think that a lot of the traditional universities are going to have to figure that out sooner rather than later. A lot of the private, smaller liberal arts colleges are really struggling right now, and I think that this solution could actually really help them. And it's not something that can change overnight, and it's a cultural change as much as it is, just pulling a few levers. And so it's not something that can happen easily, but if this is the inevitable direction that things are going, the faster that the brakes are applied, the better.
Yeah. Do you think that this will lead into more specialized degrees, like in individual areas?
I think it absolutely could. I think there are groups of people that are even more underserved than our teachers that will be very well served by this new world. And the other thing that we're doing, I guess I should clarify. So, some of the solution here will be private companies that partner with traditional institutions. But what we're doing is we're actually undergoing the process of becoming a graduate university ourselves. So we're undertaking the accreditation process right now. It's an incredibly intimidating process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money. But at the end of the day, we should be able to offer a master's degree, and that's what's really, really exciting. And so, and then other degrees going forward. And so we're really excited about that, and different people have different approaches. But the other thing I think that we're doing differently, which I think is really exciting, is in addition to having the niche in a traditional university or a traditional course model, what we're doing is we're saying, we're building a learning institution for life. And instead of just talking and telling our students we want them to be lifelong learners, we're actually executing on that. And what that looks like is to say, there are a lot of different ways that you learn. And some of those are a course and they take eight weeks. And some of those, but some of them look like a daily article. Some of those look like a weekly podcast. Some of those look like attending an event. Some of those look like a subscription service. I can't tell you today the best way to learn. I can't tell you as a matter of fact that somebody who gets a master's degree is necessarily going to learn significantly more than somebody who reads high quality articles every day for the rest of their life or listens to cutting edge podcasts about the topic of their choice. All of those learning methods are valid and important, and we want to be an institution that doesn't say one is good and one is bad.
It almost sounds like you're hitting all the different learning styles, though, through a lot of the things that you're...
Right. Yeah, so different people learn differently. So some people are visual learners, some people are audio learners, some people are need to read it to be able to memorize a thing. So different people learn in different ways, but also the same people learn in different ways at different times of their career. So there's a time for taking a graduate class. There's a time for listening to podcasts for 20 minutes on your way to work, right? And both are true. There isn't one good and one bad. And so we are not willing to say that one is good and one is bad, and therefore we're going to provide all the different learning opportunities that we think are extremely valuable to our audience.
So I want to go back to what you said about the accreditation. I think I pronounced it correctly. So it's been a little bit of a challenge for you guys to get through that process. What do you do when you face a big challenge? Like what's your process to overcome obstacles or challenges in your business, like the accreditation process?
Well, I think not diving in before you fully understand the problem, taking the time to fully scope it out and say, here are all the different pieces of the puzzle, outline it out and say, we have to cross all these T's and dot all these I's. And once you fully understand the problem, the full scope of it, then you dive in and you start piecing it out and delegating it out to the individual team members who could help.
Is that a process you do? Like you do some, I think you said you do some mind mapping. Is that part of that process?
Yeah. So, we have 42 team members now, or 44, like I said, I can't remember. So it's getting harder and harder to make sure that everybody's working in the same direction towards the same vision. And so we have a very definitive mission statement, what it is that we do. And then each year, or actually because we're going so fast, we actually do it twice a year now. We go through this mind mapping process where we try and scope out all the different priorities that what do we want to accomplish in the next year or 6 months, as it may be. And then once the leaders have sort of gone through that process, it goes down to the department heads, and they have their buy-in and their additions to that. And then we develop an operating plan as a result of that. And so this operating plan breaks down the milestones and says, okay, to reach this goal, we have to have these 5 things accomplished. And then we track that throughout the year as to what percentage of those are done and things like that. So I don't think it's anything super special, but just the fact that we're doing it, that there is a process in place, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. So we talked a little bit over lunch about like work-life balance a little bit. We didn't really dive into it yet, but I know you mentioned that that's something that's really important to you. In your mind, what is the definition of like a good work-life balance?
I actually don't love the term work-life balance, and the problem with it is that you sort of draw a contrast, right? Like you say, life, which is good, that's the reason that you exist, and then work, that's bad. That's you go there to do work, and the problem is that most people's lives is mostly work, right? We as a society spend huge chunks of time at the office, on the job site, and that's where we live. And so I think work has to be part of your life, meaning that I'm here to enjoy my time with my kids, enjoy my time with my spouse, and to do great things, and that's all sort of who I am. That's my life, right? And so that's how I try to think of it is I don't want to spend too many hours of my life doing something that I'm not passionate about or that I'm not excited about. And if I'm spending 8 hours a day at work, and I'm not having any fun, or it's not a creative outlet for me, or it's a pain in some way, then that's when something needs to change. And I used to, my old self would have said, all that's important is that you do something awesome, you create something big, or you make a lot of money, or whatever it is. And I think over the past few years, I've learned that it's a little bit more nuanced than that, right? And the money and things like that it's really just comfort is what that is, right? It gives you, you don't have to worry when you buy groceries, do I have enough money in the account? You can have a little nicer truck or a little nicer house, but really it's minimal. It's not a massive difference. What it is comfort. And what's really important in your life is your family and your friends and what you do on a daily basis and the work that you do and how impactful it is and meaningful it is, and are you doing something you're passionate about.
What do you think changed that for you?
I don't think there was a specific thing. I think it was sort of a slow realization. You just... And I think, with the success that we have had, you can sort of see what the end result is, or, where this could go. And you reflect a little bit more on what's actually important. And so, yeah, I think it gives you a sense of clarity to, I think there's a lot of people that chase things in life that, if they ever actually caught it, they'd realize it wasn't as cool. Yeah. And maybe they shouldn't have spent so much time chasing it.
It's you gotta enjoy the journey, right? Because once you get the thing, it's not gonna.
Right.
There's not like a pot of gold at the end of the ring.
No, it's not things, and it's if you ask me what I enjoy most about my job, it would be that it's a creative outlet. I get to create cool things. I get to work with cool people that are very smart. And I get to make an impact, a genuine positive impact on people's lives. And when we go to conferences and things like that, and we get people that run up to us and hug us and tell us that we changed their life. I mean, that's rewarding. That's what makes me happy at the end of the day, is to be able to say that we're doing good. And money is one of the few things that results from that, right? And if you're taking the other approach of chasing money, you'll never get it. And you won't make the impact that you hope to make.
But you need the money in order to make the difference, right? Unless you're doing like a nonprofit or something.
No. We could have a whole different conversation about that. But
okay.
I think the getting money for your services is just a net result. The money is a result. It's not the purpose. So if you create products for the sake of money, I think you'll end up with a whole lot less money in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a lesson that I had to learn when I was younger, is like, well, which one of these ideas do I think could make the most money? It's like,
right.
And then, you get it like a month or two into it and you're like, this is really hard. I don't really care that much about this thing. I don't really necessarily like the customers I'm serving.
Right.
So I think that it's really important to think about, not only who your customers are. Like, do you actually want to work with these people?
Right. But then there's also, I did a whole presentation at my alma mater about these different contradictions in business, and this is one of them. Is that because what you just said is exactly right, but on the same token, people that say you should only do what you're passionate about are wrong as well, because you can make a very successful career and be very much enjoying what you're doing by doing things that other people don't want to do, right? So people that are plumbers, maybe that isn't what their dream job was, but because a lot of other people don't want to do it, because it's hard work, they ended up going down that road. They made a lot of money, and they enjoyed their work a lot of those days, right? Yeah. And so it's not, everybody likes art, or everybody likes, working out. That doesn't mean that your career has to be in working out. It doesn't mean that you have to put on teach courses on how to lose weight. Because there are a lot of people that do that. And so I am not passionate about art education. I didn't become an art teacher, but I find a lot of enjoyment in creating courses and articles and all these the business side of it. Right, that it's a challenge for me. So it's the intellectual challenge that I find interesting, and I could find that intellectual challenge in a lot of different places, but I found it here, and it works well.
I'm trying to remember, there's some quote or something I heard once somewhere. Maybe it was on like a motivational poster somewhere on a wall, but it said something about like the one of the keys to happiness is the impact that you make on other people, like how much of an impact you make on their lives, or how much satisfaction you bring to them. It sounds like you kind of do that a little bit too. If people are running up at conferences and giving you a big hug. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely one of the most rewarding things. We use Slack here internally for all of our office communications. So I send maybe like 1 or 2 emails a week and receive maybe 3 or 4 because all of our communication is done in Slack internally within the organization. And one of the channels that we have in Slack is called Share the Love. And all it is when we hear feedback from our students, from our readers, from our listeners on our podcast, whatever it is, everybody in our company is posting these quotes that come in from our people. And that's absolutely my favorite channel. I would just leave that open all the time because it just, you can see the result of your work and time and effort and how it's truly helping people. And that's the best motivation there could possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Not everybody gets that opportunity, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, I drove up here today to do this interview in person, and I drove up to a couple hours into the middle of, is this northeast Iowa?
Yeah, right? Kind of north central.
North central Iowa.
We're close to Minnesota.
Close, yeah, really. I don't hear any accents, so we must not be that close yet. What is this, town of 3,500, you said?
Yep.
Town of Osage. And, I got up to everything looks kind of normal until I got up to your guys' office, and I was like, damn, this looks like an office right out of like a normal startup or something. And we've had a little bit of a conversation about what it's like to have an online ed company in like a small town, rural Iowa. What has that experience been like for you building that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So Jessica and I actually grew up in Osage. We were high school sweethearts, and we moved down to Des Moines after college. She was teaching art. I was doing marketing at a company down there. And once the art of education started taking off, we kind of had the opportunity to live where we wanted. It's an online company. We could do it from a laptop on the beach somewhere. But for some reason, we decided to move back to cold northern Iowa to be closer to our families, the reason we moved back. So we love this community. Our parents are here on both sides, so grandparents having access to that. We have 2 daughters, Nora 5, Cosette 1. And so that's the biggest benefit to moving back here is just have access to family and the community and the support systems that we grew up with. And so we're really glad that we're here. But yeah, with the internet business, really you have the ability to live anywhere. And sometimes I like to think about, how I would change things up. Like, you could run the business while backpacking across Europe. You could run the business while
I like the sound of that.
Have a motorcycle going across the west coast, on the western United States. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, and we're thinking about taking a month off this winter, just disappearing for a month and just going to live somewhere else for a little while. And so it opens up a lot of flexibility in that regard.
Peter, I would have anything to do with that?
And maybe Peter, yeah. Peter's in a mastermind group with me. He's a great guy and a good friend.
Yeah, he's a previous guest on here, and we talked about all kinds of interesting things. I'm not going to get too far into that, but he's had some very unique adventures.
Yeah, I don't want to do what Peter does. I just want to do like a piece of it.
Yeah. I think a little piece is good for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know if traveling for a whole year is for everyone, but
exactly.
I got to give him a lot of props for doing it.
Yeah, he's awesome.
So what advice would you have for someone who's in, because there's a lot of people that live in rural America or small towns and whatnot, and they want to get started doing something like this.
Yeah.
Like how do they do that? Because it doesn't seem like they have access to the same resources or a lot of other things. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, no, there's a million reasons, millions of excuses why not to do something right. And the bottom line is, if you're passionate about it and you want to do it, there's no better time to do it than there is today. And so the internet has just completely changed everything. It used to be that, if you wanted to get access to money, if you wanted to get access to good advisors or whatever, okay, now you have to go to Des Moines, you have to go to Cedar Rapids, you got to go to Minneapolis, whatever it is. But the truth of the matter is that now, being in middle of nowhere, Osage, Iowa, you can access to talent that you can't even find in Des Moines, to money you can't even find in Minneapolis, because now you can go global, you can go national, you can talk to anybody you want, interact with anybody you want. And so there's really no excuses for anybody in any locality to not do what they want to do, or to try to do what they want to do. And, I think schools need to start doing a better job of explaining this to their students, that the possibilities aren't determined by whether you decide to live in your hometown or whether you decide to go off to college, because you can do anything from either town, from where it is that you are. And I think that the internet is a massive opportunity for these small towns. In Iowa, it's this way, but it's this way across the entire country. As small towns are dying, continue to get a little smaller and smaller because everybody's moving to the big towns. But this is, if you can get your students in the mindset of they can build anything from anywhere, a lot of them are going to choose to build it from where they grew up. And so building that infrastructure, giving the students first the mindset, but then making sure that you have a high-speed internet infrastructure in town. You have a community of people who want to help those entrepreneurs get a leg up. I try and make myself as accessible as possible to people who want to just chat, who want somebody to bounce ideas off of or mentor them in some small way. And I think, if there are more people willing to do that, and we start talking about this kind of stuff in school and stop demeaning things like sales and business and making people think that the only moral way to, find significant success is by being a doctor or something like that, that there are lots of different ways to positively impact the world, and some of those look like running a business.
I think back to my time that I spent in a town of about 2,000 people. And what I vividly remember is that, when anybody would discuss doing anything, because the internet, Facebook came out when I was a senior in high school. When anybody would really come up with like something that they wanted to do, there was always this mentality, whether it was, it came from some of the teachers, other students, other adults. And it was just like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's not possible. And we were starting to see access to a lot of the stuff that we have now then, and now it's even like crazier with everybody having smartphones and YouTube, and you can probably get on YouTube and learn just about any skill set that you really want to. But I think it's almost a step farther back from that. It's like, and maybe it's different in no stage, I don't know, but that whole telling people that it's okay to like try these things and to mess up and like fail. Go figure it out.
No, that's absolutely true. I think, when we started our company, I remember asking people, would it be cool if there was a place where you could go that you could take classes just for art? I was talking to art teachers, a class just for art teachers, and it was optimized just for them, blah, blah, blah. And the response was, no, I'd go to my local school, and I'll go to the local college, and I'll just take those classes. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for the past 5 years, so I just keep doing that. But the truth is the exact opposite. Once it's actually built, and this is what I was saying earlier with customers can't tell you what it is they want or need. They can just give you feedback once it exists. And so, if you would have asked people what they wanted, Henry Ford would have asked them, everybody's heard this. Well, of course, they would have asked for a faster horse. They wouldn't have asked for a car, but they got a car. And now they have all sorts of opinions about how this car should look and work and operate, right? And so don't listen to the naysayers. Figure out what you think it is. Be honest with yourself, because I think a lot of people get started on an idea. They sort of realize somewhere along the line that it's probably not the best idea, but they keep going because they want to save face or whatever it is. But if you're just completely honest with yourself about what's going to work and how it's going to help people, and stop listening to people that tell you it won't work, but be honest with yourself, then I think that's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's almost like trusting your gut. Like, maybe you've had this experience. I know I've had this experience where I was working on something and my gut said, maybe this isn't going the best way, and it's time to maybe change directions or do something different. And I just tried to hang on because I can be a little stubborn.
Nope. I did the same thing, actually. In the startup before the Art of Education, another one that I was working on, at some point I sort of realized, like, I don't think this is great, but I was sort of already talking to investors and stuff, and so I kept kind of pitching it. But inevitably it didn't work out, and it wasn't going to work out. And so all that time that was spent after you sort of came to that conclusion was wasted. Yeah. And so I always, one philosophy that I live by as a CEO, is strong opinions weakly held. And so I have to have a vision. I have to have an idea of where we're going forward, and I have to be able to communicate that to a team so that we all can collaborate in the same direction. But the weakly held, strong opinions weakly held. The weakly held part is saying I'm always open to suggestion. I'm always open to change. I'm constantly reviewing the assumptions that I have in my head about why we're going in this direction. And so I think that applies to starting a business as well, right? You have to have the convictions, the strong belief that what you're doing is great and be able to defend it against people that are saying that's not going to work. This problem exists. But you have to, as long as you are always listening and figuring out if you think there really is a real problem. I've helped out done some mentoring at the Startup Accelerator before, and part of this is that the people come in and pitch you their idea, and you're supposed to sit there and pick it apart, find the flaws.
That's how we met.
That is how we met. That's right. And so I think you had a very healthy response to that, which was, oh yeah, that's a good idea. No, I could improve that a little bit. But a lot of people were heads down, not going to take any advice. I'm going to get argumentative. So maybe they're a little bit too much in the strong opinions category, right? So you have to have both. It has to be a balance, because I wouldn't have wanted them to just fold, because some of the ideas I was just throwing out as I want to make sure you've thought about this. I want to make sure that you've considered this. Yeah. So you have to be simultaneously strong in the opinions you have and totally willing to change them at a moment's notice if you have better information on the ground.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast today, and there was this guy, I can't remember who it was. He said something like, he doesn't go start a business in an area where he's an expert in, because he already has too strong of opinions, or he just takes things for granted in that area.
No, that's great. So I think not knowing much about art education has really helped me in this business, because Jessica brings that knowledge of art education, but I bring a set of assumptions that is, I don't care what's going on in the industry right now. I'm not going to compare myself against people that are in that space now, because I'm trying to compare myself against the best and the brightest that are doing this in the business world or the technology world or whatever it is. So when we build our Netflix for art teacher professional development, I'm not comparing it against the legacy system that's been there for the last 20 years. I'm comparing it against Netflix. And I'm like, how can we make this so, the interface so seamless that anybody can use it? How can we make the content so engaging that you can't avoid using it? And so I think that's a very helpful thing to have. And maybe that's a good idea when you're looking for a founder, right? You need a technical expert. You need somebody who's really good at that content area, but then you need somebody who's coming from a totally different angle. Yeah. And as long as you have the same values, then you'll end up in a good place. Yeah,
that's something I'm going to have to remember the next time I'm looking at partnering up with someone for anything, is because I think that makes total sense. And making sure you have the same value system, because if you don't, you're probably going to have a lot of conflict.
Yes. Because the biggest thing once you get to the larger side of a small business like we are, or the smaller side of a large business, I don't know how you define it, but is that you start to, I used to think that human resources was kind of a joke, right? They're the people that show the sexual harassment video when you start working somewhere, and that's their sole purpose in life. Do that and to, inflict rules upon the rest of the organization. And what I've learned over the past several years is that there's no department inside of a company that's more important than human resources, because a company is the people that make it up. It's the people that are doing the daily work, that are creating the new things, that are running the courses or writing the whatever. And so finding brilliant people and organizing them around a central vision and having systems and processes in place to ensure that they're all pointing in the right direction, headed towards the same goal, is the single most powerful thing you can do as a CEO or as a leader to achieve that goal. If they start on different planets as far as values go, and as far as a mission goes, you'll constantly be fighting each other, and the work that you do won't be synergistic. It'll be fighting. It'll be going in opposite directions.
Interesting. That's a lot to think about. I mean, it makes total sense, but at the same time, never thought about it like that before. So I have some things to chew on after that. So I want to ask one more quick question before we go into wrapping it up with some of the rapid fire stuff, and that is this one is, it's a little bit backwards, but why should someone not start a business?
I think there are real legitimate reasons to not start. I mean, first and foremost, not everybody has any interest in running a business, period. And it's a sacrifice in a lot of ways. It's a sacrifice in time. It's a sacrifice in the known versus unknown. It's a sacrifice in stress. And so I think there are a lot of people that just have, I remember one of my first marketing jobs talking to one of the people there, and I said, well, don't you want to get this next promotion and move up? And they're like, nope. And I was just blown away, because my mindset was, I was trying to go as big and as fast and get the highest position I possibly could and pay raise and this and that and the other. And there's some people that just have no interest in that, and that is totally cool. That is just as valid. There's nothing less valid about it. In fact, I give those people a lot of credit because they know what they want. They know what makes them happy, and they have the balls to stay there and say, I'm cool with this, when the rest of society is telling them they shouldn't. Yeah. So that's great. So I think, if you're going to start a business, there are absolutely sacrifices that are going to have to be in place. The biggest one when you're starting off is the unknown. I think that the number one thing that prevents people from trying to start a business, besides the cultural problems that I talked about earlier, where a huge percentage of people think that business is like a force of evil. But the next biggest one, I think, is that people are afraid of spending time that doesn't result in something. So they're afraid of spending 6 months on a startup idea and then having it fail, which it most likely will, because 1 out of 10 businesses succeed, not 9 out of 10. So it most likely will fail, and most people look at that as 6 months completely wasted. And the way I look at that is 6 months in the best education program you possibly could have been in. Because in that 6 months, you learned how to negotiate, you learned how to network, you learned how to build something, you learned how to code something, you learned how to communicate, you learned how to create a business plan, you learned how to X, Y, Z. I don't know what it is, but you learned a lot. If you actually put 6 months of work into developing an idea, you learned a lot. And that learning is going to help you in your career no matter what it is. And so if you're, just a marketing person, spending 6 months trying to build your business is the best thing you could possibly do for your career, and it's going to make you much more likely to get that marketing director position or whatever it is. And so it's not time wasted. It's time that's spent and very valuable. Yeah, so I guess I was trying to say there is the number one reason that people have is they don't want to spend time and then have it turn into nothing. And I think that one's kind of bullshit. Like whatever happens, and when it likely fails, you will not have wasted that time. So I don't think that's a particularly good reason. I think the better reasons are stress. I don't want to have to go home and be worried every night. I don't have to want to be freaked out about making that next sale or paying that next wage and things like that. And that's extremely legitimate. Cash flow, all that kind of stuff. And so I think but I will say that there are ways to mitigate that. So for instance, our business is completely bootstrapped. We don't have investors, and neither one of us quit our jobs until the company was able to pay our salaries. So we did 100% of the work on the weekends, during the night, in our 20s when we had energy. Still have quite a bit, I guess. But we sacrificed, maybe some time with friends or some time with family so that we could be where we are today. But you don't have to live in this super risky, being an entrepreneur means, oh, are you okay? Like, are you eating? Like, how's that ramen? It doesn't have to be that way. And I think it's potentially, in a lot of cases, more healthy to do it as a side hustle.
Kind of a slow transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been on both sides of that, and it's definitely a little less stressful when you have some consistent income coming in. Definitely prefer that over to the ramen diet for a few months. All right, so that brings us to our rapid fire section of the podcast. I might mix these up a little bit just because I kind of enjoyed asking you the reverse question there. But let's start with the daily routines. Do you have a specific daily routine, or what does your daily routine look like?
I don't have much routine, to be perfectly honest. I get up fairly early, get to work fairly early, try and see my kids before I go. Usually 7:30, I guess, so it's not that early.
Pretty early.
Yeah. And I usually try and get out of here fairly early. I try to leave 3:30, just so I can get home and have a little bit of alone time, and then kids are there, and so we spend all the evenings together as a family. And so I don't I try to avoid spending my entire weekend working. I try and make sure that we spend enough time doing family things, boating or whatever it might be. But I don't think that's one of my strong suits.
Right. So I guess to reverse that question a little bit, are there types of things you avoid doing other than working on weekends that make you you feel like make you unproductive?
Things that I avoid doing
Mm-hmm.
because they would make
So
me unproductive.
things that you would keep out of your daily routine, or you try not to do on a daily basis. This is the first one I've tried this.
So I think I'm very tempted to sit in Slack and just like answer questions all day long as they come in, and that prevents you from diving into sort of the bigger projects. And so as a CEO, I have to simultaneously be answering questions and giving people what they need to move their stuff forward, but I also need to be working on the big picture stuff that makes sure everybody has something to do 2 months from now, 2 years from now. And so finding a balance in that, I think, is difficult.
Kind of like from the getting out of the day-to-day stuff and into more of the like moving the big rocks.
That's exactly right. Working in the business versus on the business.
Right. Yeah, heard that a couple of times.
Yeah.
What do you think the most impactful book you've ever read is?
I'll take this a different direction. For my personality type, books are overrated. I really try and I feel like the problem with books is that they take too many examples, too much time telling you, here's this concept, here's why it's awesome, and then they spend the next 75 pages giving you all these different examples. I pick up ideas quickly, I guess. I hear them and I know immediately whether I want to apply that to my life or I don't want to apply to my life. So recently, at least, I've been getting a lot more value out of podcasts and articles and bits and pieces, conversations, mastermind group, so that I can, sort of get inputs left and right and weave those, because I have such a great opportunity to weave ideas into the existing system that's here. I want more ideas, more frequency. And so that's, I'd say that's what's on the education front, what's exciting me right now.
Yeah.
Is the spectrum of offerings.
Do you have any favorite podcasts or authors, I guess, of the articles that you read that stand out?
I don't get too caught up on any one person. I'm listening to the James Altucher podcast a lot right now. That's a really good one. I listen to the Malcolm Gladwell podcast. I follow a lot of the startup stuff. A lot of times I'm just looking for snippets. I'm looking for like little ideas, like this person did this and it doubled their growth or whatever. And so I'm looking for sort of little quips here and there, and they come from a variety of sources.
Yeah. What was the podcast I was listening to? Oh, Marketing School by Neil Patel. They're like little 5-minute segments. Sure. They have a lot of like little marketing gold in there for...
I've seen some of his stuff before, yeah.
What's something that you learned this week?
This week, I learned that when put into crunch mode, when put into a situation where everything's on the line, there's nothing more important than having a team that you trust, and you trust they're doing the right thing because they're all working towards the same goal and the same vision.
Because you built it on the same values.
Right, exactly. So we were in a situation this week where we, basically all this work that we've been doing for the past year all came down to this one day. And due to the scenario, I couldn't be there to do it. I couldn't be the one there to implement. And I had to sit back and watch my team basically do it for me. And I had to just count on their expertise and their knowledge. And it was a pretty amazing thing because I felt 100% confident. I could just sit back and be proud of what it is that they were doing. So that was really rewarding. And I don't want to put myself in a position in the future where that's not the case. And so, hiring and firing is an interesting thing. And we've been really blessed here. We haven't had to let anybody go that I can think of right now. And I think though that I'm not remotely scared of doing it. And the reason is because it's not about the person that you're letting go. It's about everybody else. And so if you have somebody who isn't holding up their end of the bargain, if somebody who isn't performing at a high level, everybody here is performing at a very high level. They're not just doing their job. They're going above and beyond because we're all trying to accomplish this bigger mission. And so when you have somebody who isn't doing that, they're not harming themselves. They're not harming the company. They're harming all the people around them, all the people that are trying to do a great job. And all of a sudden they have to lower their expectations as a result of this one person. And so you're doing it because there isn't a perfect culture fit. You're doing it because it's just not a right spot for them. And you have to be the defender of the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's almost like the concept of putting, when you end up putting an individual over the whole team.
Right. Yeah, so a lot of times you'll see, well, I wasn't going to fire him because that wouldn't be the nice thing to do, or that wouldn't be, it's not fair to them, or whatever it is. But you have bigger responsibilities when you're in these shoes, and you have to defend all the people within the organization. And so I think I'm just glad that I have the opportunity to do that. I think, when you think about schools and instances like that, I think there are oftentimes leaders that know what needs to happen in order to make massive changes, in order to make real differences, to change the culture and improve student learning and all this kind of stuff, but they're hamstrung by the status quo and how painful it would be to make one change or two changes. And so I'm glad that we're not in that situation, and everybody can be accountable for what they're adding to the equation.
Yeah. Yep. I think that makes total sense, and I'm glad you guys are in that situation too.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, I want to say thank you for spending time with me today to talk about your business and share some of your experiences. Do you have any shameless plugs or any type of message you'd like to leave with the audience before we sign off?
Thanks for doing it. It's been great. No, not really. You guys can check out the site at theartofed.com. That's theartofed.com. Short for The Art of Education.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to check out any of the stuff that Derek is working on, go ahead and head over to theartofed.com. Now, on another note, if you'd like to receive, or you think you'd be interested in receiving other podcasts, blog posts, maybe some ramblings or guides on how to do different things that our guests have shared with us, go ahead and head over to helixacademy.co and sign up for our weekly newsletter. We have a lot of interesting stuff. If I see anything that our previous guests have shared or have going on, I try to throw that in the newsletter as well. So that way we can kind of, share the love a little bit and help keep you informed on what's going on. Thank you again for tuning in to our episode this week. My name is Trevor Carlson, and I look forward to you tuning in or stopping by for our show next time.